In 1967, Roberta Leigh, known for collaborating with Gerry Anderson and for doing her own marionette TV shows, such as Space Patrol, wrote a pilot episode for a live-action sci-fi series, something Anderson wanted to do and would eventually do with UFO in Space 1999, but she almost got there first. The show was called The Solarnauts. Now, sadly, this pilot was not picked up, but I got a chance to look at it, and it was pretty darn cool, so I thought it would be worth taking the time to sort of do a review of it, kind of a if only it had been made review. And I hope to be doing several more of these kind of reviews over the next few months, looking at pilots that were very cool but did not make it into production. Now, the show is kind of light sci-fi adventure. It is aimed towards kids, so they're not going for that deeper adult stuff like you got with Star Trek, with Anderson's Space 1999. It opens with, well, a very science fiction-y kind of shot of planet Earth. And it's a pretty good planet Earth. And I mean, a lot of stuff back then didn't do that well with that stuff. We get an orbiting space station. And if you watch this, you'll notice it has the look of the props that you got in Anderson and in Roberta Leigh's own marionette type shows. They have that look. We get to see a spaceship, the one our heroes are going to be flying around in. Note the windows on the front for scale. This is like a 2-man sort of patrol ship, a futuristic city in space. You'll note that same spaceship. This is from the side, flying past it. And finally, we get the ship docking at the space station. Roll some credits, created by Roberta Leigh and Arthur Provis. Mode Live and space effects by National Interest Pictures are doing our special effects and such. You can see here the cityscape is like on top of that space station that they were docking at. We get several shots of the city, and they took a lot of time with it. You know, it wasn't cheap to build these models. This is a pilot, but they're trying to show off what they did, obviously to sell it to people. And then we get the interior with this man, who we'll meet a little bit later, really, taking some documents from a woman and then sitting in his command chair. Gives you an idea of the art design of the show, which is actually very bright, very much like Star Trek, which was kind of the thing of the day. And then finally, we see the patrol ship heading back out on patrol, perhaps with a new mission. All of this is done to a very jazzy theme, lots of bongos, very cool. That's the opening for the show. And then we get the credits. Aboard the ship, we have John Garfield. His name was really David, but he went by John. He is the son of the much more famous actor, John Garfield, playing Power. Now note, this does not appear to be a last name. He is just called Power. Derek Fowlds plays Tempo. Now, Derek has more of a resume in acting than John Garfield, we'll say Jr. did. Basil Brush, you're British, you'll know that one well. Yes, Minister, horror movie Frankenstein Created Woman, Tower of Evil. So he did a few things. John Ringham plays Tri-S, the guy we saw in the command chair. Ringham did lots of British TV, Z-Cars, The Tripods, Dad's Army, Are You Being Served, The Avengers. And Tri-S, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. So the first actual shot of the teleplay could almost be lifted from Star Trek. Note the planet there. The music was also kind of similar to a Star Trek opening. A little more detailed, perhaps, that planet than you got in Star Trek. But this show is set primarily in Earth's solar system. So you get the feeling they maybe could have put a little more effort into the planets for these kind of orbit scenes, since they would have only had a limited number that they were using ultimately. Well, the planet in question is Mars, and Power and Tempo are scanning it for sci-fi type stuff. And then a reading on 7725, positive, some sort of cloud, and it's over Colony Research Base 4. They try to make contact with their scanning tower, but get only static. I love the model of the Mars colony, by the way. I wonder which one of those little towers holds Elon's apartment. Not really sure. Well, they call in to Tri-S to get permission for a closer look, and he's already monitoring the situation back at the space station. So the guy is called Tri-S. I think it's because he's the leader of Tri-S, SSS. We'll get to that maybe later. It's an odd name, but Power and Tempo are also odd names, and sometimes they like to do that in sci-fi to give it that sort of futuristic, otherworldly feel. We get a couple shots of the station as they pan across, little reminiscent of Space 1999's main mission, if it had been designed in the late 60s. Shows the way sci-fi shows combine not only the aesthetics of their time, but also the technology of their time in these designs, even though, of course, they're always set in the future. But you can kind of mostly imagine from what you can conceive, what's real around you when you're looking into the future, and obviously you miss a lot of different things. Well, Tri-S is annoyed at how little data they're getting on this cloud, complains about machines and how there's something to be said of the old days when humans did the work themselves. A attitude very much of its time, and an attitude that's very much of our time as well. At this point, 2511 comes up on the monitor, so 2511 is the designation for Power and Tempo's ship. And this color palette just absolutely fascinates me. At any rate, Tri-S does not give them permission to land and check things out. They argue and get a resounding "don't argue." Now, I've noticed that in British sci-fi, it's a little more hierarchical than American sci-fi, in a way, and just the way that the way the person in command speaks is a little bit different than the way, say, an American character in command would usually speak. It's a different delivery. I guess it's just a cultural thing. Well, Power, tells Tempo, after that outburst, he goes, "You'll like him when you get to know him better. He used to be a Solarnaut." So this is a guy who's up from the ranks. But not getting permission might not matter, as they soon lose their gyro and start descending into the atmosphere of Mars. And at this point, we get the title of the episode, Cloud of Death. The screenplay is by Roberta Leigh. It's directed by John Llewellyn Moxey, who directed City of the Dead, and such TV shows or episodes of the TV shows The Saint, Mission Impossible, The Avengers, Mannix, Kung Fu, Miami Vice, Magnum P.I., and Murder, She Wrote, as well as the pilot for Charlie's Angels. And he also did TV films like A Taste of Evil, The Night Stalker at Kolchak, and Genesis 2 for Roddenberry. In other words, the dude is a pro, and he really knows his stuff. Well, they're still going down in the spaceship. The lightning hits one of Mars's research colony towers, causing an explosion. Here's a closer look at the Mars colony before the chain reaction of explosions. And here it is sort of after. It is wholesale destruction on Mars, destroys the entire research colony. The explosions finally cease, and the Solarnaut ship is calmed. They report back to Tri-S, and then we get this great shot, very brief, of, I think, this is Virginia Wetherell directing Tri-S's attention to the monitor. Virginia doesn't have a character name in this show, but her resume includes Clockwork Orange, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, and the TV film version of Dracula that starred Jack Palance. Well, the monitor shows the destruction of Mars Base 4, but interposed on it is the face of Logic. Yes, it's spelled L-O-G-I-K, so as an American, I would generally say Logic, but he is called Logic. He tells them that this cloud is his latest invention. He controls it through space. He has made repeated demands that the mineral rights on Mars be returned to his solar system, probably means his star system. Logic is played by Alex Scott. Guy had been in, The Avengers, The Persuaders, Danger Man, The Saint, Randall and Hopkirk, Deceased, The Abominable Dr. Phibes, and Twins of Evil. So, a resume you would expect from a British actor at that time. Well, the Solar Assembly will never agree, but they might want to rethink it because Logic has launched a larger cloud that will soon be over the capital city of Mars, which they tell us has a population of 50,000 people. So that's probably where Elon lives. So they have 12 hours before the capital is destroyed. Now we have our plot. Power and Tempo are going to have to stop Logic from destroying the capital of Mars. We get another cool shot here of the command post set, the galactic clock. Tri-S surmises that Logic must be within our solar system to be controlling the cloud. He orders his people to locate him, and they quickly do. Asteroid K-137 in the asteroid belt. The Solar Security Council is to be alerted so the fleet can be sent to the asteroid belt. But our favorite Solarnauts, Power and Tempo, just happen to be the ones who are closest to it. So, nice shot of the spaceship here. Presumably uses some kind of control over gravity to propel itself, because you get like no visible like rocket exhaust or anything. So again, kind of like the Enterprise, and a really smart thing to do with these models, because trying to get the little flames coming out, not particularly easy, when you're doing models this way to make it look realistic. And by the way, this fella he was talking to is George Rubicek, who played Captain Hopper in the Doctor Who serial Tomb of the Cybermen, but who was also in The Dirty Dozen. He was Imperial Commander Prodigy in Star Wars, and he was in a couple Bond pictures. Well, Trias explains that Logic wants a foothold on Mars, then Earth and the solar system will get a dictator. So this is important. He has to be stopped. Meanwhile, Ship 2511 goes into orbit around asteroid K-137, and they spot something that must be Logic's headquarters. They move in for a closer look. We get another nice model, very alien looking. Again, very much looks like something that would be in an Anderson production. Bam! A trill of horns, and Logic enters his own command center, and I love it. I love how bright it is. I love how crazy it is. And here's our special guest villain doing the Jack Kirby bit. They've detected the solar scope, so I guess that's the name of these patrol ships, in Sector 5. So they open fire, and they do so with cannons, which I thought was really kind of cool. And you get some anti-aircraft fire effects here. It was hard to catch a still shot showing it, but it's a boost, 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 boost. So even in 1967, you see World War II is having an impact on the look of sci-fi. So the ship brings up its missile barrier, i.e. kind of like force field shields. Once they're out of range, they report back to Trias, who commands them to destroy Logic's headquarters before he can destroy the capital of Mars. So, simple job, no big deal. They decide to fake a crash so they can sneak into the base. They take these tubes from their little, cockpit there down to this smaller craft that's docked beneath the solar scope, and with it, they jet down to the surface. They generally call it the disk. Love the headgear here. Actually, not that different from what you got in Star Trek. A lot about the show is almost like a combination of Star Trek and old Buck Rogers. And I mean that in a good way, but it's kind of a second cousin even to Lost in Space, although maybe a little less goofy. Well, the little runabout is hit and it goes down, but they eject before it crashes. So essentially, their plan works, and Logic is very happy that the craft was destroyed. He has been snookered. We learn here that they wear gravity stabilizers that permit them to float, if not fly. The technical jargon in this is a pretty good example of why Roddenberry ran things through experts before they ended up in Star Trek. And even then, they sometimes screwed up. But, so some of the technical jargon doesn't really make sense. That's what, to me, makes it a little more like kid sci-fi than grown-up sci-fi. Well, while they're exploring and looking for cover, a mysterious hand appears on a rock behind them. Creeps closer and closer, and just before it can strike power with a rock, Tempo nabs her. It's a girl. This is Candia, played by Martine Beswick. She was in From Russia with Love, Thunderball, 1 million years BC, in which she had a catfight with Raquel Welch. Probably really well known from Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. She was in The Happy Hooker Goes to Hollywood. Go Google it. Lots of TV, including Sledgehammer, Fantasy Island, Fall Guy, Mannix, $6 Million Man, and she was inducted into the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Awards Monster Kid Hall of Fame. You cannot beat a resume like that. Well, she turns out to be with Meteor Control. She was collecting meteor samples and has been stuck here for 2 days after Logic destroyed the observatory. She thought they were Logic's men, which is why she was going to attack them. When power goes off to destroy the disk, so they, don't wonder why there's no bodies there, Tempo has a chance to chat up the bird, as the British say, and he takes that chance. Well, while this is going on, the airlock doors in Logic's base open, and a patrol vehicle comes out, heading for the disk. Thankfully, it passes straight by our heroes, and they're not discovered. When it returns through the airlock doors, Tempo, Power, and Candia gain entrance to the complex. And this is another one where they take a while with this because, again, they built the model and they want you to have a chance to see it. And, you know, you're showing off what you can do to get the series picked up. So you want to be able to show off your prowess at building these props and these sets and all this other good stuff. So we get another cool interior of the large passageway and the patrol vehicle moving away through it. Our heroes then start creeping through the fortress, not too different from like Luke and Han, you know, would be doing a decade later in the Death Star. They have to avoid Logic's android guards, who are kind of like the stormtroopers, you know, and in this case, they paralyze that particular guard with a sort of ray gun, just like Han Solo. Star Wars, obviously, is just a ripoff of Solarnauts. The truth can finally be told. Well, the ray is supposed to keep the android out for 6 hours. At this point, they finally remove their helmets to make their going easier because there's breathable air here. And you got to also think those things are probably a big pain in the butt to have to act in. Well, while Logic continues pressing the solar assembly for those mineral rights, Power and Tempo show off their localized delta bombs. That's that little thing in his hand there. Basically can stick to things and they'll explode. They're going to place these throughout the complex so they can blow it up. They are real problem solvers, these guys. Candia wants to help, but of course, you know, she's a girl, so what could she do? But she ends up going with Tempo while Power goes off to confront Logic himself. Remember, Tempo is the rookie, so he's not as by the book as Power. He's a little bit more fun. You know, Power, it's kind of like Adam 12 with that relationship, the vet and the rookie. Okay. And here's another cool set of the cool shot of the fortress set. I really love this stuff. While the show is not huge on plot or characterization, I mean, it's there. It's just not like a real big focus. It has all the elements, I think, to delight a kid and really fire their imagination. Well, Power is interrupted by a guard while he's planting bombs, and he's no match for the android. But he does manage to stun it with his ray gun. You get lots of them, you know, so you get the effect there of what it looks like when he's stunned. Lots of them running through passages, dealing with guards. Man, you know, again, it sounds like it might be tedious, but I can remember as a kid imitating this stuff, you know, from the Death Star and Star Wars in elementary school on the playground. So it's a show aimed for kids. I think it would have pleased kids, and you could make some pretty cool toys off some of this stuff. Well, then we get this passage with these triangle shapes. And when Power steps on one, it sets off an alarm and it sticks him to the floor so he cannot move. And moments later, the same thing happens to Candia. A triangular tube descends from the ceiling to entrap her. This is bad news, of course, because the bombs are going to be going off in 6 minutes. The tube then ascends into the ceiling, carrying her up there, and presumably this is what happened to Power, to deliver them to Logic. Well, Tempo finds a ladder, so up he goes, and he sees the tube prison thing kind of rolling along the passageway, delivering her to another chamber. I can already picture like the action figures in the playset for this thing, even though action figures like Star Wars style weren't really a thing at that point, but maybe somebody will make them for a, you know, unclaimed pilot someday, who knows. Well, so Tempo is looking for a way through the door. He's accosted by an android, and he manages to throw it onto one of those triangles, and because of that, he's able to follow that triangle tube into the chamber. And the chamber happens to be the command chamber of Logic. He's getting reports of delta bombs being disposed of around the complex. And with a gesture from him, the upper sphere of the base rises up into space just before the rest of the complex explodes. And as he activates the cloud, preparing to detonate it, Tempo sneaks up behind him. But before he can act, he's attacked by an android. A fight breaks out as Logic counts down, and with just 2 seconds to go, Power manages to grab a ray gun and blast the control panel and destroy the cloud. And Logic is captured. Or is he? Suddenly he kind of glows like that was a sort of illusion, And then we see him escaping through a secret passage in the wall. So he will be back to bedevil the Solarnauts in a later episode that sadly would never get made. A very suggestive rocket now shoots out of the spaceship, carrying Kolchak with it. So, off to a rendezvous with Security Space Fleet, with Candia along for the ride. I presume she was going to maybe be added to the series for future episodes, but maybe not. It's hard to say, but really good. I like having her there. She had good chemistry with the guys. I think it really helped. But, of course, Tri-S regulations forbid carrying female passengers, so the fleet will relieve them of her, and everybody laughs. And off they go as we fade to credits. And before I give my final thoughts, just wanted to shout out Roland Whiteside, the designer, and Natasha Kornilof, the costume designer. They did really, really good stuff in this. Whiteside also worked on Space Patrol, the Marionette show, and another Marionette show called Paul Star. It's another pilot that didn't get picked up. Now, Kornilof was a Russian costume designer who, are you ready for this, designed stage outfits for David Bowie, including the Pierrot costume he wore on the cover of his Scary Monster album, a spider costume for a Ziggy Stardust concert, and others. And apparently she had a fling with Bowie as well. That's why I like to look up who these folks are and what their backgrounds are, because sometimes you'll find some really interesting stuff. All right, final thoughts on this one. Sad that this pilot did not get picked up. Yes, it's very much kids sci-fi, but, you know, if they could have popped off 20-something episodes of this, I think it'd be something warmly remembered to this day. Has a lot of elements that I think kids, you know, would really enjoy. Reminiscent, like I said, a little bit of Star Trek and Buck Rogers. I could see kids pretending to be Power and Tempo, running around battling Kolchak. I think it would have worked. Didn't get picked up, though. But good fast pace, great design, and, you know, decent acting. You know, again, not a real complicated plot, kind of what you expect from adventure serials. But, you know, you need that kind of stuff. A lot of kids grow up on that stuff, and it does teach them actually some valuable lessons about the world. So maybe it doesn't excite the mind of an adult, but not everything needs to be made for adults. And sometimes all of us adults out there need to indulge in some childish fantasy just to kind of get our brains back in the right place. All right. That is The Solarnauts, created by Roberta Leigh from 1966, 1967. I'm sorry. I think it kind of started in 66. And then maybe they started making it in 66. I think 67 was when it was maybe finished. Let me know what you think of The Solarnauts in the comments. You think it would have worked? You think there was more life in this thing than we ultimately got? What do you think of the design? What do you think about the costume designer having a fling with David Bowie? I'm sorry for the British audience. David Bowie. Look, we had Jim Bowie, who we always used to say Bowie. And so David Bowie. For some reason, we didn't call him David Bowie. I don't know. It's really complicated, but let me know what you think about Solarnauts. If you enjoyed this little review, please give it a like, subscribe, share with a friend. It'd be very cool. But we will end with God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Watch the Solarnauts. Short pilot, but it's a lot of fun. And I will hopefully see you again soon here in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.